I'm the author of a book that was published actually just about 3 years ago now about this problem we're having in the United States that I call the pedestrian safety crisis in the US. And so here's an image that I'm sure a lot of you have seen that really gets to the heart of the matter. Actually, just since the book was published about 3 years ago, this problem has gotten much, much worse. You can see really pedestrian deaths have been skyrocketing since the pandemic. So there's a number of issues at play, but one of the clearest ones really is this big shift in our vehicle mix that started taking place about a decade ago. And around that time when we were coming out of the Great Recession, it used to be that most cars sold in the United States were smaller cars like sedans. And since that time, there's been a real shift away from that towards bigger cars like SUVs and also these mega-sized pickup trucks. So I talk a little bit in my book and when I do presentations about this, about the impacts that has on safety. So you can see here, I'm using myself for scale. I'm about 5'6". So you can see if I was hit while I was walking by this smaller vehicle, this Honda Civic, which used to be the more typical kind of car we had in the United States in the 1990s, it would hit me sort of in the legs and then I would fall forward onto the front of the car. But right now, with the bigger vehicles in the mix, we're seeing that the average car look a lot more like this Toyota 4Runner here on the right. And those cars pose additional risks to pedestrians. If I was hit by that car, for example, I'd be hit sort of in the chest or the abdomen. These are really dangerous places to be struck, to be struck very, very hard, the way these vehicles hit people with this very heavy force. So as far back as 2015, NHTSA actually released some research showing that pedestrians struck by SUVs are 2.5 to 3 times more likely to be killed. So they've known for a while this is a problem, and they released that study kind of quietly. We still have never addressed this in any of our regulations. So I just want to walk you through a little bit, sort of the evolution of one vehicle. And I'm using here a RAV4 as an example. You can see like when this car first came on the market, it was one of the first crossover SUVs. It was a really pretty small car. It was just kind of a tall, Toyota Corolla, and it has a very kind and gentle looking front end. That was the style at the time. And during this time, this was kind of a low point in pedestrian deaths in the United States when this kind of vehicle was in style. But since then, we've seen cars become much more aggressive in their styling and much bigger as well. So if we look at this car in 2019, and the RAV4 is the #1 selling vehicle in the United States outside of pickups, but it has a much meaner looking front end, a much higher grille, and it's heavier as well. So all those things contribute to bad pedestrian safety outcomes in the US. We know that the way vehicles are designed is really having an impact on the safety on our roads and leading to people dying. And until this point, NHTSA had never been willing to act. In addition, we've also seen pickup trucks become really enormous. This is my son when he was 4 years old, photographed in front of a lifted Ford F-250. You can see also that these vehicles have big front blind zones in many cases. So in some cases, as many as a dozen kids, this was an experiment done by a group called kidsincars.org, as many as a dozen kids could be seated in the front end, the front blind zone of some of these best-selling vehicles and be completely invisible to the driver. So a lot of safety issues come up with these bigger vehicles, but there's good news. And, as part of the infrastructure bill, it's really exciting. I'm not exactly sure who, but someone inserted into the infrastructure bill new rules, or that NHTSA, our federal regulator, needs to develop some new rules. And one of them was this requirement of automatic emergency braking. So they're, until this point, they hadn't been testing vehicles with with pedestrian dummies like this. So we weren't even able to tell for sure which vehicles were most dangerous to pedestrians. So now they propose for the first time doing that, testing these vehicles for pedestrian impacts. And they're proposing requiring automatic emergency braking and automatic pedestrian detection, which is a very exciting development. I'm just going to pause real quickly to discuss that. There is a study there. I think that there's a real potential for these technologies, these sensor technologies that are becoming standard in vehicles, but have been limited in some cases right now to the top of the market new vehicles. There's a real potential to save lives there. There was a study done by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety a few years ago, and it looked at insurance claims by vehicles that had a suite of these high-tech safety features in them. They were all Subaru vehicles, and it included pedestrian detection, automatic emergency braking, lane keeping, and blind spot detection. And they found that vehicles that were equipped with those technologies were involved in 35% fewer pedestrian crashes. They had 35% less insurance claims, which is to me a very exciting result. So if we could, just by using technologies, reduce these deaths 35%, that would be amazing. And in addition, a lot of these technologies are not quite fully mature. So right now, automatic pedestrian detection, which hasn't been regulated, doesn't always work as well in dark conditions at night when a lot of pedestrian deaths actually happen. So there's a lot of potential, especially now that regulators have agreed to require these technologies, for the technology to really improve. So I know a lot of you are out in your communities working very hard towards really aspirational goals like Vision Zero. This is these technologies are a great opportunity to make those initiatives more realistic and a little bit easier for the folks on the ground who are struggling with things like street design. We've needed for a long time our federal regulators and the auto industry to come together and play their part. So this is the biggest step forward we've had in my lifetime on this, and Kathy's going to talk more. But I did want to say, as a little bit as historical background, the United States has never regulated vehicles into this point for pedestrian safety, even though we have pages and pages of regulations that specify all sorts of things about vehicle brakes and airbags. There was regulators, or there was some discussion about this in the 70s and 80s. And then again in 2015, and every time they have sort of punted on this. And one of the reasons has been because a lot of the features that they use in Europe that protect pedestrians, and that has to do with the way the front end is designed, relate really closely to vehicle styling. So the auto industry in the past has been reluctant to take this on because they're worried it will affect the way vehicles look and affect their sales. So it's exciting that regulators have stepped up, but I agree with a lot of the comments America Walks has made in their written summary of this issue, that it is disappointing that NHTSA isn't going further with its vehicle ratings. It has proposed, we have a 5-star vehicle rating system in the United States. And when the infrastructure bill was written, it required them to update this and to include pedestrian safety ratings for the first time. However, it is disappointing that they've decided not to include that in the 5-star rating that gets posted on the front of cars at the dealership, and they've decided to give pedestrian safety its own separate check mark rating that they will only display on their website. So that is a really disappointing aspect, even though there are some really exciting elements to this new proposal that I think have the potential to save a lot of lives. It is disappointing that they're still, even in the midst of this crisis that's been described, bringing forward half measures. And in particular with this 5-star vehicle rating, we're not doing a good job of even informing the public, consumers, of the additional risks they pose of being involved in a serious pedestrian crash if they purchase a larger vehicle. So I'm not going to say any more about that without turning it over to Kathy, who has some more interesting things to share about what's happening on the legislative side.
Thanks, Angie. That was a really great perspective. Thank you for framing it for us. I really enjoyed your presentation. And thank you to America Walks for inviting me to participate today. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, I guess, if you're on the West Coast. My name is Kathy Chase. I'm the president of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. We really enjoy our partnership with America Walks, great team to work with. And Advocates was created in 1989. We're a nonprofit lobbying organization, and our mission is very simple: safe vehicles, safe road users, and safe roadway environments. So we aspire to improve legislation and policy on the federal and state levels that accomplishes that. I was asked to talk today about the regulatory process, and I'm actually going to talk about 3 options. I think Ben may have mentioned 2, or then he said a few, but there are 3 possibilities right now to be really involved in our nation's policy. It's a really exciting time, like Angie and Ben both mentioned. So let me do regulatory process 101, I'll call it. As Angie mentioned, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, required that the U.S. Department of Transportation, or USDOT, take certain actions. And Angie mentioned that she wasn't quite sure how that happened. So I'll just take a quick second to say it happened because of, activists, including probably many people on this webinar today, who have been pushing for years to get these provisions included. And there were some really stellar members of Congress, such as Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, Congresswoman Sherry Bustos, Senators Duckworth and Durbin. So there were a lot of champions in Congress who really pushed to get these provisions included in the IIJA. And that's what brings us to where we are today. So the first one establishes a means for providing consumers information relating to pedestrian, bicyclist, or other vulnerable road user safety technologies as part of the New Car Assessment Program, also known as NCAP. The IIJA required that NHTSA issued a notice by November of last year, but does not require NHTSA to complete the rulemaking or to do so by a date certain. That's the first one. The second one is that the IIJA requires DOT to issue a rule requiring passenger motor vehicles to be equipped with automatic emergency braking. However, the IIJA did not require that the rule be issued or complied with by a date certain. And the third one is the law required that DOT issue a rule requiring commercial motor vehicles, also called CMVs or trucks, to be equipped with AEB. The law requires the rulemaking to be completed by November of this year, but there is no compliance date. In response to these 3 directives in the law, the USDOT subsequently issued the following. On May 26th, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, also referred to as NHTSA, issued a request for comments on including crash-worthy pedestrian protection testing program in NCAP. Comments for that are due next Tuesday, July 25th. On June 13th, NHTSA issued a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or NPRM, to require passenger vehicles, which are sedans, minivans, SUVs, and pickup trucks, to be required to have AEB. Comments for that are due August 14th. And then on July 6th, NHTSA issued an NPRM to require trucks weighing over 10,000 pounds to be equipped with AEB. Comments for that are due September 6th. The public really is encouraged to submit comments. It really does influence, or can influence, the final rules that are issued by the department. In fact, I attended, and Mike was there as well, when the USDOT released the NPRMs, and the chief counsel for NHTSA said, please submit comments. We want to hear what you have to say. We read all of them, and they can influence a rule. So that's why we're having this session today. It's really important. I now just want to talk a little bit about each one of those three possibilities to submit comments. First, NCAP, or New Car Assessment Program. By any measure, NCAP has been wildly successful in terms of educating consumers of performance of cars. It was founded in 1979, and it's been copied the world over. Ours was the first one, but the others have leaped far ahead of ours. And it's an important tool because it informs consumers about how cars are doing in terms of safety. And it's also known as the stars on cars. You may have heard of it that way. In addition, it has inspired, or it had inspired, automakers to exceed federal regulations so that they could boast and say, oh, our car got a 5-star rating. However, as I mentioned, we're really outdated, and it's become more of a participation award, like everyone gets 5 stars. And that's why we've been pushing so hard for years to get NHTSA to update NCAP. However, as Angie mentioned, we're disappointed with some of the aspects of NHTSA's recent proposal to include a crashworthiness protection program in NCAP. First, the notice doesn't propose a comparative rating system for crashworthiness protection program or propose any changes to the NCAP 5-star rating program to include a vehicle's performance as it relates to pedestrian safety. Instead, the agency will be implementing a pass-fail scoring system. In addition, NHTSA will not be including a vehicle's performance on the new vehicle sticker, as Angie mentioned, displayed in a dealer showroom. Instead, the agency indicates that it will identify new vehicles that need a certain minimum threshold on NHTSA's website. And I don't know how many people check out NHTSA's website, but I'm guessing probably fewer people than those who look at a sticker in the showroom. So these shortcomings cast a serious doubt on NCAP's ability to provide consumers with accurate information on a vehicle's performance as it relates to pedestrian safety. In addition, the incentive for manufacturers to improve a vehicle's pedestrian safety performance is also hampered. So we encourage you to submit comments, and Ben is going to talk more about that next on how to do that, and about America Walk's action alerts, which are fantastic. The second way that you can get involved is with the light car, or just light vehicle or car AEB with pedestrian detection. AEB is a well-known and well-researched technology that prevents or mitigates crashes involving impairment, distraction, drowsy driving, drug driving. In essence, if someone is not braking when they should, the car will alert you, and then if you still don't respond, it will take over the braking capability for you. I have it in one of my cars, and it's only happened once, but it was really impressive. That said, as Angie mentioned, it's only in some higher end vehicles, or manufacturers are upcharging it because it's in a package of non-safety features like a heated steering wheel or a moonroof. And we have been urging NHTSA to require this as standard equipment for years. So because every family deserves the safest braking system, it's that simple. So this NPRM is a great step forward, because it will require that the technology is standard equipment, and that it meets a minimum performance standard, because the systems that are being sold right now, we are reliant upon the manufacturers to want to put out and sell a good product. But we know that doesn't always happen. And that's why the federal government, which is the regulator of this industry, needs to step in and set the minimum performance standards. As Angie mentioned, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, or IIHS, has demonstrated that AEB can be wildly successful. It showed that that they could have a 50% reduction in front to rear crashes, a 56% reduction in front to rear crashes with injuries, and that AEB with pedestrian detection can result in a 27% reduction in pedestrian crash rate and a 30% reduction in pedestrian injury crash rate. That's really some jarring numbers in a very positive way. Also, since 2016, the National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, has been including crash avoidance technology in its most wanted list. So, there's another stamp of approval to get this into cars. However, we are concerned about some of what's in the NPRM. The rule that NPRM should address all road users inside and outside the vehicle. We were glad that it included pedestrians, different lighting conditions, and certain speeds. However, it does not include detection and response to bicyclists, people in wheelchairs or using assistive devices, or people on micro-mobility options and motorcycles. These road users must be included as well. The systems that the IIHS reviewed in terms of bicyclist safety were better at preventing parallel crashes than crashes of other types. And we all probably know that nearly 1,000 bicyclists are killed on our roads annually. So absent a requirement for auto manufacturers to meet minimum standards that protect bicyclists, they will continue to be at unnecessary risk of injury or death. Euro NCAP has been testing AEB with bicyclists for detection since 2018. And in the AU, new vehicles must be equipped with pedestrian AEB that detects bicyclists by 2024 and 2026. So we know this can be accomplished. The NPRM also does not require the need to perform at speeds under 6 miles an hour. This fails to address the issue of frontovers. And Andy showed the most compelling photos that one could have, which are all of those children in front of a high vehicle in a blind zone. And that's why it's so important that this rule address that issue. Excuse me. And it's especially an issue with larger passenger vehicles. Minivans, SUVs, and pickup trucks are approximately 75% of new vehicle sales. So we need to urge NHTSA to improve its rule in those ways. And then the third way to get involved is the truck AEB and PRM. A lot of acronyms, I'm sorry. In 2021, nearly 6,000 people were killed in crashes involving large trucks. 631 of those were non-occupants, such as pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. And there were nearly 550,000 people injured in crashes involving large trucks. Over 2,800 of those were non-occupants. Since 2009, the number of fatalities in large truck crashes has increased by 71%. So requiring comprehensive AEB for trucks has been a top priority of advocates, our organization, for nearly 10 years. We filed a petition for rulemaking with NHTSA, which was granted in 2015, but then no subsequent action was taken until the recent NPRM. Truck braking capability can be a factor in crashes. Compared with passenger vehicles, stopping distances for trucks are much longer, particularly on wet and slippery roads, or if the brake systems are poorly maintained, as we know can happen. IIHS has concluded that forward collision warning systems with automatic braking, also known as AEB, could prevent 41% of large truck front to rear crashes. In addition to preventing crashes, a key benefit is mitigating the crashes that do happen. Among front to rear crashes of trucks in which these technologies intervened, speed was reduced by 50% on average between intervention and impact. Data shows that in 2020, large trucks were in nearly 100,075 crashes where the front of the truck was the location of impact. AEB on large trucks could potentially address as many as 72,000 large truck front to rear crashes. That's a tremendously high number. We were very pleased that NHTSA included in the NPRM medium duty trucks, or also known as class 3 to trucks, class 3 through 6 trucks. To give you an example, these are the trucks that are going through all of our neighborhoods delivering e-commerce packages. And that's where people are walking and riding their bicycles. So we were very, very pleased that the NPRM included these medium-sized trucks, which were not included in the directive from Congress. So we encourage you in your comments to say that this is a very positive step. Our organization is continuing to review the technical aspects of the truck NPRM, but we know that this is a step in the right direction, and that we, of all of these rules, we are urging this administration to bring it over the finish line. The NPRM is the first step, but we need final rules before this administration is ended. One last note, this past Monday, we advocates held an informational session on the car AEB NPRM and what's in it in more detail. So if you want to check that out, our website is saferoads.org. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thanks, Kathy, and thank you, Angie. That was a very detailed breakdown on what's good in all of these programs and what needs to be improved. So I just want, as we mentioned, we had some opportunities to take action right now, collectively, all together here. But before we do so, I just want to highlight some of the impact that comments can have on this process. And some of you may remember, we went through a sort of similar thing last year. There was a request for comments on the new car assessment program on NCAP. And we collectively, local advocates at the national level, managed to tell Secretary Buttigieg and USDOT in over 16,000 comments that vehicle safety needs to be overhauled. And a lot of the comments, ours from America Walks as well as others, highlighted in particular that mature safety technologies, things like pedestrian automatic emergency braking should be required in cars. So that's a whole lot of comments. And now this year, we have NHTSA putting forward proposals to make vehicles safer, including requiring things like PAEB in new cars. So since we're all here on this call, Mike again, our executive director, has put in the chat a few different links, but we thought it'd be a great opportunity to right now submit with just one click a letter to NHTSA. If you're feeling more ambitious, there are also the links to regulations.gov, where you can draft up your own comments based on some of the notes that you've taken today. But first, for America Walks, we have our action alert for the new car assessment program, pedestrian safety ratings. And you can either find that link in the chat, or if you have a phone handy, scan the QR code here. That will bring you to an automated letter that you can actually personalize as well and make additions and changes to. But our 4 basic points here, the top line messages of this action alert letter, is we really want to see pedestrian safety ratings incorporated into the overall 5-star safety rating for the NCAP program. Right now, as both Angie and Kathy have said, a car can fail a pedestrian safety rating and still get a top level 5-star overall safety rating. And that's just misrepresenting a car as safe when it's actually not. In this letter, we also highlight including visibility from the driver's seat as part of a pedestrian safety test. Angie showed those really disturbing images of how difficult it is to see, in particular, children from the driver's seats of larger cars. And this is imperative that we think about visibility from the driver's seat so that we're avoiding the potential for conflicts and crashes altogether. We also want to see, and included in this letter, is that pedestrian safety test results are available at the point of sale, i.e. they're on a sticker in a dealership, and not put on NHTSA's website for no one to look at ever. And then last, and this has been our message for across several of these different requests for comments is we want to see safer vehicle designs not be something that's left to consumer choice, i.e. you read the safety rating and say, okay, I like that, or I don't, but rather these safer vehicle designs should be standard on all vehicles rather than up to consumer choice. So we have the opportunity here to click on that link or scan the QR code and submit that comment. I'll give you a moment for that. We also have a second action alert for the rulemaking for pedestrian automated emergency braking. We want to see this as standard in all new cars, and we have that link in the chat too. And once again, we have the QR code on the screen that will direct you to that if you have a phone handy. One click. In this letter, we're highlighting two main things. As Kathy said, right, we want to see pedestrian automated braking. We want to see the highest possible standard of this technology. We want NHTSA to hold automakers to that standard. So that includes the ability to detect people of all different sizes, including children, not using a standard male body as the test dummy. We want this technology to have the ability to detect people with darker skin tones. There's been some concerns about that with studies and research that's been done. And we want this technology to be able to detect everyone using the street. That includes people on bikes, that includes people with mobility devices. This technology exists. Europe is deploying it shortly, and so we think we should too. And our final message on the pedestrian automated emergency braking rulemaking is that this is a mature technology that's been around for a while. And there are other similar mature technologies out there, safety technologies for vehicles. We want to see those technologies also be included as standard in all new cars so that there isn't an upcharge for having a safer vehicle. So you can find this link in the chat as well. And we have the QR code here you can scan too. So if you want to go ahead, you can use that one click and send a letter to your NHTSA regulators. And I'll give you a moment for that. And then last, but certainly not least, the final action you can take today, and we have more actions you can take after today, but the final one you can take today is spreading the word. We need as many people as possible to know that these kind of obscure regulatory processes are going on. We need to show that public support exists for making these vehicles safer. We know it exists, but we need to show it to regulators at the federal government. So we also have, as part of today's programming, a number of sample social media messages you can use. And there's a link in the chat once again, or you can scan the QR code here. So tell your friends about this opportunity to make vehicles safer for pedestrians. That amplifies your impact, amplifies the impact of your comment if more people are also taking that action. The messages we have, they're designed specifically for Twitter, Facebook, but really they're just text messages. They can be used anywhere, LinkedIn, Threads, whatever your social media platform of choice is, it can be adapted to that. So find that document, the link to it in the chat, and let's all go ahead right now. Put this message out on social media. Let's get more people signing up right here today. So as you're doing that, there's also an opportunity to weigh in the question and answers box. And I'll encourage you, once you've shared the message, to do so. I've mentioned there's a few other opportunities that will be coming up outside of the ones we talked about today. In particular, we're looking at next Wednesday. Advocates for Auto and Highway Safety, as well as America Walks, has been following this closely. And there's the House Energy and Commerce Committee of Innovation, Data and Commerce Subcommittee is going to be holding a hearing on autonomous vehicles. And I think there's, there are probably a lot of polarizing opinions out there about autonomous vehicles and their role to contribute to auto safety or not. But the bill, as we see it now, is something that raises a lot of red flags and exempts actually autonomous vehicles from a lot of federal motor vehicle safety standards and preempts state and local governments from taking action to regulate them as well. So we're holding a virtual meeting, our virtual media press event on July 29th. But be on the lookout for more information about this as it comes forward. There will be opportunities to contact your representatives and tell them, that you want to see autonomous vehicles held to the same high safety standards that we just proposed here today.
Hey, Ben, sorry if I mistyped. The media event is actually on the 25th, next Tuesday.
The 25th. Okay.
My apologies on that. The day before the hearing.
Day before the hearing. Excellent. July 25th it is. So yes, be on the lookout for that. We'll have more details and information for you shortly. But I think that's probably given us ample time with a lot of different questions to be answered. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to introduce Arliss Reynolds, America Walks board member and Costa Mesa council member, who's going to moderate our Q&A today.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Angie and Kathy, for your presentations, and Ben for the breakdown on the calls to action. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A and a lively Q&A over on the side here. I really appreciated, Angie, you setting the context. I think probably most people who attend these webinars recognize the challenges of mobility in our across our country, but seeing the numbers is always so jarring and a reminder of the urgency of this issue. And Kathy, thank you so much for breaking down the regulatory process. It is complex and I think makes clear the value of this kind of work, at what you're doing, what we're doing at America Walks to really facilitate getting these action alerts ready. And Ben, I want to clarify because we've had some questions here. So we've got sort of two specific calls to action, and then the third is to share with your community to ask them to also participate in our calls to action. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And the first call to action that we did, that we shared around the pedestrian safety ratings and new car assessment program, I'll just reiterate that one closes July 25th, so that's next Tuesday. And the pedestrian automatic emergency braking rulemaking, that action or that request for comments closes on August 14th. So there's a little bit more time with that second one.
Great. Okay, so we need some quick movement from you all on the first call to action, but you can go ahead and do both in the next week so we can get those in on time. And we will be sending information to all the registered panelists where you'll get links as well if you weren't able to catch them during the webinar. So going to some of the questions we've seen come in through the chat, I wanted to start with the crash test. So Angie, you shared an image of the pedestrian dummy, and that's a new crash test. I think we're all very familiar with some of the videos of sort of the traditional dummies inside the vehicles. I'm shocked. Is it correct? So I have two questions here. Is it correct that 2020s is the first time we're doing pedestrian dummies for crash testing? And then a follow-up question is, are we doing crash tests with just sort of adult-sized walking dummies, or do we do child-sized and then also people in wheelchairs, if you know?
Kathy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I'm not an expert on this, but I do have one on staff, so I'm glad to follow up on information. But what I can share is that I am not aware of any pedestrian in a wheelchair. There's also no requirement, as I mentioned earlier, for testing for people in wheelchair who use wheelchairs or assistive devices. And we have asked NHTSA for clarification on if the definition of pedestrian actually includes people who use assistive devices, and we have not gotten a clear response. So that's why we're urging NHTSA to make sure that it does include. Now, the rules include, I think it's a 50 percentile male dummy, and well, I'm going a little off script here, and then a child dummy. And then our comments actually say, urge NHTSA that if these two dummy sizes do not capture data on the crash implications for a female, that then they use a female dummy as well. So this gets a little more in the weeds. And like I said, we have about an hour, maybe a little less, webinar that we did on Monday, which is on our website, which will answer this question. So check out saferoads.org, and it gets a little more into the weeds on the pedestrian AEB car rulemaking. It hopefully will give you all the information that you'll need on that.
There was a related question, Kathy, and maybe that same webinar will address this, related to what's being tested. And the question is testing impacts on torsos versus head, upper leg, and lower leg. Do you know that I think the concern is that the test does not include impacts on torsos? Do you know the reason for that?
I don't. These are really good questions. I should have had our engineer join us today, but check out our webinar. And if we don't answer your questions, feel free to email me and I will get you an answer. My email is cchase@saferoads.org.
My understanding actually was that they're using these test dummies only to test out the AEB and not the actual injury impacts. Ben, I don't know if you could say more.
I believe in the NCAP crashworthiness program, it's looking at impacts with regards to, I believe, I'm not sure about the torsos in particular. I know head is certainly on there. Looking at different pedestrian crashworthiness is really a technocratic way of saying, like, where do you get hit and how? And that's the main gist of evaluating. There's a whole different percentage breakdown as to where the dummy gets hit and whether or not that's safer. There is another part of the program too, which I think maybe warrants additional comments as well, about the automakers will have to do the tests themselves versus NHTSA actually carrying out those tests, which, as you imagine, might include a bit of complications.
Luckily, our engineer is watching and just emailed me and said the AEB NPRM is only for AEB. Angie is correct. Impact protection is not being tested in the NPRM. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, it's very limited. The testing that they've never done this before, and the testing they're proposing, even so, is very limited. So, range of body types, that's not on the table. Very limited what they're doing.
I'll jump to the sort of an activism question and request. Ben, you shared the results of the 16,000 letters that Pete Buttigieg received asking for action on this topic. Now we've got several calls to action to push further, right? I think we're hearing in this discussion right here that we're just starting to scratch the surface of the need with safety here. Maybe Angie and Kathy, can you talk to just the value of comments from individual people, organizations, local governments? What is the importance of these calls to action in terms of real policy making?
Really important. I can say from personal, professional experience that advocates has been cited in final rules and saying, throughout the years where there was an NPRM put out and they say, you know, advocates or other organizations or individuals, you know, for example, like thousands of truck drivers have weighed in, and it does have an impact. I think that public participation is a critical part of our nation's policy making. And now is the time to speak up. Like, we have this opportunity and it should be used. It's really important.
One thing I would say also is that, you know, this problem has gotten a little bit out of control. And I think it's partly because it's been a little bit invisible. There hasn't been a lot of grassroots enthusiasm about vehicle safety issues as they relate to pedestrians. And the problem has not been the kind of thing dominating headlines the way actually it sort of has come to recently. So it's been a little bit lonely for groups like Kathy's, who are engaged constantly, but we need more to make more noise, and they need more grassroots support. So that's why it's nice that groups like America Walks, who are dealing with folks who are a little bit further from the legislative space, if we can engage more of those folks, there's really no limit to what we can do. And since the era where we really were successful with these kind of issues, that was back in the Ralph Nader era, after he published, you know, this best-selling book that really raised awareness about a lot of these issues, the amount of public attention has really fallen off. And I think you see that we're losing a lot of additional lives as a result.
We have about 100 people on this call, and that could be 100 more comments. So please do give that call to action. It's really, really meaningful. We're seeing a number of questions. I think there's a lot of interest on this topic, and I think recognition of the dangers of vehicle design these days. There are a few questions related to some other features of cars. So just sheer size of cars. We've seen some presentations in the past of just how, you know, even the same model of a vehicle has grown over the years. There was also a question about tinted windows. Are you guys aware of any movements related to those features, size of cars, tinted windows, or other features not part of this call to action that may, you know, also push for additional safety design?
I mean, there's a lot of complaining about it that takes place, and there's a lot of awareness raising that has taken place recently, but there isn't right now, you know, a rulemaking that we're expecting, or I should say there's been a few examples in states like New York, and I've heard rumblings in California too, where on the state level there's been some proposals to do warning labels or something like that with some of these larger vehicles. So we're still in the awareness raising and building support phase for things like that. But one thing I will say is we did a previous webinar with America Walks with an expert from Europe named David Ward, I believe. And he said that NCAP is really valuable in this way because it really does motivate. So NCAP, the vehicle safety rating system, automakers really are motivated to get good ratings on those. So even short of a regulation, if F-250s, for example, were really penalized for having 57-inch grills, which is how a lot of them are now, that's an incentive that even before regulation can help kind of you know, de-escalate that. And usually that type of thing precedes a more restrictive regulation. So I would say these kind of efforts that are taking place right now are a precursor to that kind of action. And we need to keep building sort of support and a groundswell to take on those kind of challenges.
I think we've seen some local almost end around actions to deal with the size of larger vehicles, in particular with regards to excise tax on vehicles. Washington, D.C., for instance, just started to levy taxes by vehicle weight. And so that's sort of like NCAP, right? Shaping some of the carrots and the sticks for buying or selling a larger vehicle.
A future call to action, and we'll use this one to show interest in this area. Kathy, I think this next one may be for you. It's a very specific question about some of the regulatory proceedings, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. Last March, NHTSA put out a request for comments on NCAP regarding several advanced driver assistance systems, including pedestrian AEB. Do you have an update on that? Or do you expect that NHTSA will release a response or final rule on that?
I hope so. We've certainly been encouraging them to do so. Unfortunately, there is no requirements that they issue a determinative rule on it by a date certain. But as I said earlier, for all of these rules, one of our most important messages have been bring it over the finish line. It's great that they've taken the steps to issue either a request for comment or an NPRM, but until there's a final rule, no real change has happened. So, you know, in your comments, ask NHTSA, urge NHTSA, don't ask them, urge NHTSA to finish these as soon as possible, because every day that passes, people are unnecessarily imperiled when we have proven solutions at hand.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Ben, we're at 5 minutes before the hour. Want to give you some time to close and reinforce the calls to action. Kathy, Angie, thank you so much for all your work to get to this point. As advocates and activists, thank you for giving us the opportunity to make these calls to action. Ben, remind us what to do and
yeah. No, thank you, Arliss, and thank you all for your questions. I think those it's really great to see all of you getting down into the weeds as well, right? Like, we want to walk away with these programs being the best possible programs that they can be. So I'd like to encourage all of you still one last time. You know, as Arliss said, there's about 100 of you on this call, and 100 of you sign the letter. That's great. But if each of you could get 3 more people to sign that letter, you know, we are now at 300 additional comments. So please, please, please share that message. And so I'll just close today with a thank you once again. And with America Walks, we always have a lot of different webinars going on. We have one just around the corner on July 26th, sidewalk inventories and a tool for equity and ADA compliance that we're putting on once again with another great group of partners. So please, if you're interested in that, do register. We'll be sending out all the material that we have today. This webinar was recorded. We'll be sending out those links as well, so that will be captured too. And just a final thank you to Angie and Kathy for all of the great material you talked about today and helping everyone on this call really make their comments be the most impactful. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.
And donate to America Walks. Don't forget that, people. That makes this advocacy possible. AmericaWalks.org. Join the movement for safer, better streets. Your individual donations allow us the freedom of movement to advocate for the best possible places. Thank you.